Okay, so welcome to today's webinar on detention pond design. This is a very interesting and very relevant topic, one that we're looking forward to doing a lot more with over time. So we'll give opportunities throughout the presentation and at the end for her to give us feedback on which areas to focus on. My name is Twomey. I'll be presenting today's session. I'm a Senior Solution Consultant based in Sydney with Bricsys. I've got over 20 years experience in the general CAD, BIM, GIS consulting space. In the background we've got Sagar Thorat, who's a tech lead for APAC, and he'll be checking the questions and working as a panelist for the session. We'll be happy to follow up with any more detailed questions after the session, and also we're going to run a few polls during the presentation to give you the opportunity to give us feedback and give us a chance to know what's needed. So, in terms of the agenda, we'll start off with a brief intro. We'll go through a few of the basic principles. We'll talk a little bit about the quad and what we're doing with it in this civil site design space. In terms of detention ponds, we'll briefly touch on the importance of water-sensitive urban design, and we'll explain a little bit about the approach we've taken in terms of a standard cross-section to design these ponds. We'll then get to the technical presentation, which we'll break roughly into 3 parts, which we'll explain in a second. And at the end, we'll do a summary and give the opportunity to do some polls and feedback for future webinar sessions. So, you will have noticed that the title of this webinar is BricsCAD and Civil Site Design. If you go to the BricsCAD App Store, you'll see we've got hundreds of different add-ons, a huge number of different categories, very mature selection. Civil Site Design is one of the most popular of these, and when you see it in action, you'll understand why this is the case. It's a very powerful civil tool set, and it does everything from road design, drainage, stormwater, highways, and in the case of what we're looking at today, it'll be site grading and documentation. So, when you open the software, you will see that the ribbon on the top has got a full set of tabs, sits on BricsCAD, works through very interactively. What we have done here is introduce the functionality into the quad as well. So for those of you who haven't seen the quad, it's an interactive cursor menu, and it enables us to have all kinds of information and also context sensitive information. So you'll see when we get to the presentation that depending on what's highlighted, various options will show up, which we can see here in the screen capture, where we've highlighted one of the ponds and we get a bunch of options that are relevant to that particular function. So this is something that I've been working on as an experiment just to enhance the user experience and do more with the full BricsCAD functionality. What we're looking at today is an early proof of concept version. So on your current installations, you won't have this particular quad version available. I'm very happy to say that the Civil Site Design Development team, they've seen this and they've already started work on a completely interactive version, which does a lot more than what I'm showing you today. I'm looking forward to using that in the near future. So, let's talk a little bit about detention ponds. Now, the concept in traditional urban design was always focused on taking stormwater runoff and pushing it into streams as quickly as possible. The problem with this is that it causes issue, and some people call these issues urban stream syndrome. It's mainly there's increased concentrations of pollutants and solids in the waterways, and also the peak flows cause issues with the waterways. So the general shape of the streams gets damaged and everything else. So there's been a big push on improving water-sensitive urban design. It's also called low-impact design or green infrastructure, or I think in the UK it's called sustainable drainage systems. So in a basic sense, what happens, as you see in this diagram here, is that stormwater flows into a basin or a pond, and in there it's allowed to percolate through various systems to get purified. Now, depending on whether it's detention or retention, it may stay there or it may get channeled into other areas. The clean water is then integrated back into nature, the landscape. On this example here, it's a detention pond, but we do have an outlet swale on the right hand side. That's to cater for overflow when there's a large storm event. So this improves the quality of water and prevents flooding and everything else, but it also improves the area as a public open space. So we will do some visualization with Twinmotion at the end to show how we can take this and communicate that. In terms of the design, the science of the detention ponds is definitely very complex, and positioning the ponds in terms of the general topography, it requires plenty of thought. It's quite an art form, but the geometry of the pond topology is reasonably straightforward. So if we look at a cross section, we'll see what we see down here, which is some clever things happening with the pipes below the pond, but the top of the surface, and I've got a blue line here showing it, is a relatively simple cross section. So we've got the arrow here showing where we have our center line. We'll move to the left with a distance of 1 meter at a slope of 1:2, and we'll call that code where we hit the bottom of our pond, the bed of the pond, and then the bank will be the top of our bank on the right, and I refer to batter as where we slope down to existing ground. I think in the US this is called daylighting. So that cross section is represented in civil site design as something like this. So it's the exact same diagram, only in pure line format. I've called this one public pond 1 fixed depth. So when we look at this, you will see the code exactly as we've shown here. And during the presentation, we look at the ORBAT code, which is the right batter. So that's where the pond meets the surface, as in the existing ground surface, which is where we put on various symbols for our slope batters. The cross section through the overflow area is more simple. We'll start where the water is and drape that onto the existing ground and go up and down in a very small embankment just to allow the water to channel through. So this is actually the diagram in the background that you're looking at here. That was done in Twinmotion. And before I forget to mention it, this can be downloaded for free at the moment. There's a promotion going where if you got a license of BricsCAD, you can get Twinmotion for free. So at the end, we'll show you the link for that as well. So just in case you're not making use of it, you definitely should. Now, in terms of the technical presentation, we'll start with some brief analysis. We'll look at the slopes and topography of the existing ground. We'll then go on to the next phase, which is doing a bunch of design parameters, which is most of the presentation. And at the end, we'll leave some time to do some production. So we'll do a little bit of standard 2D CAD work. We'll get a few long sections and typical sections going. We will look at options for exporting to various BIM formats, and we'll touch briefly on the Twinmotion for visualization. So with that, let's get into the software. So I've got BricsCAD here. Right, so the first thing you'll see is the ribbon palettes that we mentioned earlier, so we can see all these up on the top. The main thing we would use today is the grading one. So you can see where everything is located here. I've got some existing triangles in this drawing. If I look at my layers, these are on a layer called line work triangles. So what I would do now is just start working with the surfaces. So I press create edit surfaces. I'll give this surface a name of natural surface. Press OK, and what I want to do here is look at my various input tabs. So you can add points, break lines, boundaries, etc. I've got 3D faces, and they're on that layer called line work triangles that we showed earlier. So you press add and press build, and you can see we have now constructed a surface from these triangles. Now what I always like to do here, to be sure that I've done this accurately, is go to my outputs tab. And I've got an option here with the mouse is to show my triangulation. So the green triangles are the existing survey as been given by the surveyor. The brown triangles are the ones that I have created on top of them. So I can toggle this on and off just to satisfy myself that I've made an exact copy, because as we all know, once the triangles work correctly, then everything else is good as well. So once I'm happy with that, what I can do is turn these existing or original triangles off and now work with my surface. So what I might do here is go to my contours, and I'll first of all change the interval to say 0.2 and 1. So it gives us a clearer view of how things are happening. What we can see here is by the top of our surface, the northern end, there is a much steeper slope than there is as you move down towards the south. So that's probably where we're going to place our detention pond. If you want to illustrate that more clearly, we can go to our slopes and arrows tab and we can click on show slope arrows and press update. So this clearly shows the embankment and the flatter area, which is exactly what we need to get started. And we would do a lot more with this. I'll turn off the slope arrows for the time being just to keep my display easier to look at. What I can do at any time is, now I'll start using the quad here. So I started with the ribbon menu. If I hover over my surface, you can see that I get a bunch of options here, one of which is create water drop. So when I press OK, I can use this to illustrate exactly the shape of the topography of the surface. So I'm accessing that literally by hovering over any entity and seeing the options that become available. So let me erase those. I think we're happy with the general shape of this. And sorry, let me do that again. Let me erase the line work. Now let's go and start doing some of these ponds. So what we would do at this stage is we would do a polyline and use that as the basis of our grading object. Rather than spend time drawing that, I've got one I made earlier here. So I'll just unfreeze this layer. This is just literally a 2D polyline. So when I go and highlight that, I will see an option here called create grading string. So I select this and I'm presented with a dialog box here which I'll just work through. So first thing I'll do is call this pond. For the template, I'm going to pick a template here called pond 1, which is a template I showed you earlier for the general pond area. So it's literally going to the left by 1 meter at a 50% slope, then going to the right by 1 meter, and then battering down to our existing ground. So I'll press OK for that. For my initial elevation, I can pick a point here. I'm going to change it afterwards, so I'm not too worried about that. And I've got a bunch of options. I'll press create update and see what I get to begin with. So I start off with a default grading object. In terms of the other options we got available, if I select this and drag the point out here, so I've got a very exaggerated curved area. What I can do here is look at my corner options. So currently it's on radial. If I made it clover, you can see how it changes the shape here. I could make it a chamfer, which goes for a straight line, or a mitre. Usually it's radial, so we just build concentric curves coming out. So normally I tend to leave it on radial and work off that. The next thing we would do is go to our vertical grading options here and start changing the elevations and the various slopes and everything else. And we can do this by typing in values, and we've got a bunch of options down the end here to do all kinds of options with that. What I prefer to do is go to the vertical grading editor. So this effectively treats the grading object like a mini road, and it lets us work through the a visual representation and position our design based off that. Now at this stage you can see our screen is getting quite cluttered and busy because it's a single screen presentation. I'm going to press Ctrl 0 to go to clean screen. Because I can run everything from the quad, I don't need to have my ribbon available all the time. I can press Ctrl 0 to bring it back whenever I want, but I do like to work off this maximized screen area so I can really control what I'm doing. So on the vertical grading editor, as I move my mouse around here, you will see the green arrow, the green marker line tracking where I am on the plan view, so I can see exactly what I'm doing. Also, the yellow line is my design, so it's currently flat, and the green area here on my vertical grading is my natural surface. So if I go and move my yellow line up here, I will see my contours update from my grading object. I can do quite a few little variations on that. What I can also do is highlight this grading object and use my water drop option again. So this time we'll specify the surface as being the pond. We'll add a water drop, and I'll put a few here. You can see that they're currently traveling up the screen towards the top. So if I go and add a new point, and looking at where the green tracker is on plan view, I'll put it here so all the water will drain towards that area. The contours update, and if I hover my mouse again, I can use the quad to update these drops. So I see an option here saying update water drops. Everything then moves to show exactly where the low point is here, so you can see precisely where everything is draining towards. I can continue doing that. I mean, in this case I'm exaggerating it quite a lot to really show the point, but when you're either working out scenarios or when you're trying to communicate to somebody else how these scenarios work, it's a very, very interactive tool to work through these. In this case, the pond to begin with is reasonably simple. All we want to do is minimize the amount of fill that's going to happen in the northern end. So we would position these elevations to work through that. So that's close to what we want. If we look at our tab here, we can see we're on 45.372. So I'll make that 45.4. So we got a nice even value. So that's good enough for what we need here for a starting point. We can always change it afterwards and do more work with it, but I'm happy with that to begin with. I'll just erase these water drop lines. So the next thing we'll do is look at the outlet swale. So we'll go back to our layers tab here, which is still visible even in clean screen mode on the right hand side. Turn on pond 2. And in here, same process. Now in this case, we'll do a different approach. So I'll select and click on create grading string exactly as before. I will call this overflow. I will pick an elevation, even though we're going to change it again pretty quickly. The template in this case is a slight variation. It is called spillway. And when I press create update, we get this. So what we see here is that the vertical grading is at 44.5 more or less. And it's staying at that elevation for the entire range of the string. That's not what we want. We want to drape the yellow string onto the surface and just basically do a small embankment based off that. So to do this, we've got an option on our grading window here in the bottom. Just hold my mouse over it. It's called Add IPs to Match Surface Levels. So you press this, press yes, and it now changes this. So it is literally draped that string onto the surface and allowed us to work off that. Now I'm just going to hide my natural surface contours here so I can get a clearer view of what's happening. So I'm going to use the toggle display option here. So I select this. This shows me all of the surfaces that I've currently got in my session. So I'll take NS and just turn that off. Press OK. We can see more clearly what's happening here. So at this stage, the contours have run across the center of my embankment as well. So if I turn that off, they disappear. I'll leave them on at this stage. You will see that they're not entirely parallel. They're a little bit jagged because it's working off whatever the natural ground slope is. So what I always like to do here is go to my vertical grading editor. I'll just reposition this slightly. And what I'm going to do is delete all the IPs currently. And the reason for this is that you can see that the natural ground is sloping towards a low point just down here where that green marker is on plan view. So what I want to do is add an IP here, or place it roughly to begin with. And you'll see that when I place this, I have the option to type in specific numbers for the chainage and the level. I can also type in curve length, so if I was doing a road design, I'd use those. You'll also see that we got options for the in-grade and the out-grade, which are currently grayed out. So we'll explain those in a second. I'll first of all press OK, and this puts a much more even set of contours into my file. You will see just where the mouse arrow is here on the top of my vertical grading window. We've got -7% coming in and +7.3 coming out. So you look at this and you think, well, I could probably reposition this and get a even 7% on each side. So instead of trying to place this graphically and work that out, what we can do is select IP Edit. That brings us back to the previous window that was shown when we added the IP. And on the bottom, we've got a few options. So if I click on select in-grade, I now specify the in-grade and my level has been grayed out. So depending on which option you select, different parameters become available. The one I want is the last one, so I specify the in-grade and the out-grade. So I say -7% from here and +7% from here. When I press OK, that works out perfect. So I can now see that my low point is just down the bottom, exactly where I want. I got a clean 7% grade running down my spillway on each side. So I'm happy with that. Excuse me. Happy with that. What I want to do now is close this and build a new surface, which is a combination of my natural surface and my two ponds. So to do this, I don't want to damage my original natural surface. I want to keep it exactly as it was from the surveyor. So what I'll do is make a new surface. So I hover over one of these areas, and this time I'll select paste. So again, the quad will interact and present us with exactly what we need to do what we need to get done for this process. So I click on paste surface. I will add a group, and this group I'm going to call combo. I will add surfaces here, so I want my natural surface, my pond, and my overflow. Now the order here is important, so I want to start my natural surface, paste the overflow, and paste the pond. Since these two surfaces don't overlap, it doesn't matter which order they're in, so I'll put pond first, just for being pedantic. I will draw your attention to this button here saying apply codes to triangles. When we get to doing visualization later on, this is the option that will enable the software to automatically apply materials. So having that turned on is pretty important. When I press build update, I get my, my new surface here. So what I can do again is highlight this and select toggle, and I now see my pasted combo surface. So I'll just change the interval of these to 0.2 and 1 again. Press OK, and we can see here how the contours wrap around these ponds perfectly. So we get a properly blended surface across the natural surface and pond 1 and pond 2. So what we'll do very quickly is one more grading object, which will be the bridge area between our pond and our overflow area. So I'll just draw a polyline very, very quickly. I'm not going to worry too much about getting this too accurate. I'll just place it here somewhere. And when I highlight this, I could do a road, but I'll just use a grading string again. And I'll call this bridge. At this time, I'll be careful and select my target surface as being the combo surface. Because I wanted the grade to the end of pond 1, natural surface, and the start of my pond 2 stroke overflow area. The template, I would click on I've got a bridge option here, which is more or less the exact same thing as the it's more or less the exact same thing as the original pond, only it has a batter on both sides. For the elevation, I'll click an area here. I'm going to change this to match both of the surfaces. When I press update, I see my new grading object here. So to really emphasize how this works, I'm going to show this in much higher detail. So we'll go back up to paste surfaces, to toggle surfaces. I've got my bridge surface here. I'll change the minor interval to 0.05, just so it really stands out. You can see here that the contours here where my mouse is, they're not blending into the pond just yet. That's because we've got a constant elevation of 45, as we see here. So if I go and select vertical grading editor, we can see very clearly what's happening here. So where the mouse is here, the green tracker on plan view shows us where the contours aren't blending into the surface, and that's because you can see that the IP is way below the top of that pond. So what I can do is just graphically move that up. I could snap to it, but just in the interest of time, I'll do it quickly. You can see now it's behaving as it should. The contours are running down the side of the embankment. I'll do the same thing for here. So I will move this down so it matches the peak of the other pond. So great, I've now got myself what's effectively a small little, I'm calling it a bridge. It's like a connection between the two ponds where the overflow pipe can be put in place so that as water gets high enough, it will flow down and out to the spillway. So what we could do here is, well, I won't do it in today's session, but you would then go and build some more of these. So you would build an approach area from the main road coming down, etc. What I will do is build my final finished surface. So I'll go back again to paste, and I'll make a new group, and this group I'll call finished. What I could do here is take my combo and the pond and just add those two, but instead what I'll do is just pick all my original surfaces. So natural surface, pond, overflow, bridge. And the reason is I want to show how the order can work quite well here. So Start with natural surface and put the bridge last. So on natural surface, we paste the overflow, paste the pond, then paste the bridge on top of those. So when we do this, I will save and close. Now again, I've got many surfaces on top of each other here. So by using the quad, I can go back to my toggle display anytime. Select this, I will turn everything off, except for my finished surface. And I will show that at, I'll make it quite tight, I'll call it 0.1 and 0.5. So press OK. And now, when we zoom in here, we can see how the contours are doing exactly what we expect. They're wrapping around the embankment, across the bridge, and over to the embankment of the other surface. What we can do is select here again and go back to our original surface management area, which is this button here. So for create edit surface. So in this one, we've got PST finish highlighted. So we go to outputs, we can see our contours here. I'm going to go to slope and arrows again and say show slope arrows. And we can see very clearly here how, first of all, the green arrows in the middle of our overflow area are a nice clean 7%. Also, we have the flow from the pond coming into our overflow area, and in general we can just get a picture of how the entire thing is put together. We can change the colors of all these. I've actually got one saved here which I've called slope arrows. So if I just open this one and press update, it's just the same information with a different set of colors. So you pick whichever set you need and work from those. So at this stage, we've done most of what we need for our design here. We now move on to documentation. So on the documentation side, let's briefly look at the layers here. So if I switch this to my filter for surfaces, I can see I've got my finished surfaces here. So if I turn that mesh off, I can turn these on and off. I could remove my toggle, but if I want to control these in different viewports, I can control it from this layer toggle here. What I'll also do is create some geometry to represent the slopes and the overall shape of this embankment. So to do that, I will right click here, go to output and click on slope arrows. So the string I'm working off is my pond, so I'll use my original pond to begin with. We mentioned earlier that the right batter, the RBAT code, is where the embankment meets the existing ground. And the symbol I want to use is going to be a slope symbol. So I'll start with slope pattern lines. I'll go from 0 to, say, 5 to the end of the road. I'll go for an equal spacing of 2 meters and press OK. What I see here is a set of lines which really bring out the shape of this embankment. What I will do is quickly, I will just turn off these slope arrows for a while on my finished surface. So go to slope arrows, turn these off. I'll also change my contours to, I'll make this 0.2 and 1, just so it's easier to see what's happening. Okay, so we can see the green lines represent where we're in fill, and we've got some red lines in cut. There aren't many in cut, but we can see where both of them show up. So what I could do is change that again, and instead of showing slope patterns, lines, I can show tadpoles. These are usually used for highways, but they're a very good way to really emphasize the topography. So that gives us the general plan view of what we're after. What I want to do now is create a typical section. So to do that, I will go and do a polyline. So I'll go from the north to the south, right through that pond area. And I need to turn this into an alignment so I can start doing a section from it. So when I hover on my quad, I get an option here saying create alignment. So I'll call this alignment typical section A. Now if this is a road design, which alignments are usually used for, you would get very particular about the labeling. So you can see we have change labels in here. In this case I don't need any of those, so I will just import a blank label set. Press OK, and that does exactly what I need. I now have some horizontal geometry. I need to create some vertical information so it knows what to show in the cross section. So what I will do is hover again and click on create string. So this will sample the various surfaces. If it was a road, you would pay a lot of attention to all these options for your spacings and your samplings and everything else. In my case, I don't need those. I don't need my design. All I want to do is make the string aware of the surfaces around it. So that's been done, and now I can highlight again. And in this time, I will click on plot long sections. If I had cross sections, I could plot those too, but I plot one section here, select. What I now see is a section view. So I've got a bunch of options in this dialog box. I can click on, say, A1 blank page, and that places it in an A1 space. I can click on A1 title and start playing with these scales. So if I make this 100, it will change the overall dynamic. Rather than play with all these and take too much time, I've saved a style already. So if I load the style here, I've called it typical section, and when I plot that to layout, what we get is this layout tab. Now I've clicked plot to layout because it's a small file and I can just show it in a layout tab on my existing file as opposed to external files. It creates the paper space viewport for me. So I've got that here. Once that's been highlighted, I could go into my layer tab and, for example, click on slope patterns and turn these on, turn these off, etc. I won't do that just yet. I could, let's leave it alone for the time being. What I want to do instead is look at this cross section, or this typical section, sorry. So I will go and let's look at this area where the embankment is. So we may want to add more detail here because this is not a detail section, it's a typical section. So I might want to represent that the embankment is made from various soil types. So to make a hatching pattern, I will extend here. I'll use the boundary command. I'll pick a point here. What I'll then do is I'll offset that boundary a small amount, and I will hatch that offsetted boundary. And the hatch pattern I'll pick, I'll just type in earth, and I'll select the boundary entity here, and I can see my earth pattern showing up. I could go and change the scale of this if I want to be more detailed. Press OK, and that gives me a basic piece of hatching here. I would then go and type in some information. So I will do a very simple version of this. I will say, turn on caps lock, match to existing at 1:3. So you would cover this thing in notes and make that as your typical section. You would quite possibly erase all of this and arrange it in that type of format. Rather than spend too much time doing it here, I'm just going to move that to one side. I have made one earlier, which I've called typical section. So if I insert that, you can see how it would look. And you might do this in model space as well and make a separate viewport to look at it. Everyone's got their own processes for doing it, but the point is you can use the software to generate the overall section and then annotate that with CAD information. So cover that process quite well. Also, at any stage in this, you can press Ctrl-0 and come back to the ribbon view and use your general CAD tools up on top here to get done what you need to get done. So that gives a brief taste of the CAD production side. The other area to look at is the 3D for BIM and for visualization. So to do this, let me remind you of one thing first of all. When we did our paste surface earlier, we clicked on the option to apply codes to triangles, and you will see why that's important now. When I will right click here and go to my outputs tab, and I will select on model viewer. So what this is a very, very quick way to look at a model, and you can exaggerate vertically and do all kinds of interactive views. If it was a complex road design, you can add multiple surfaces and have them interact. In our case, we're just going to look at the combo model here. We press OK. What we get is a very, very simple viewer. But the important part is that it has segregated the triangles by materials based on the codes. So we can see, for example, if I right click on the natural surface and click on assign material, it's currently got a material called grass. If I change that to, let's see, topsoil, all that changes. So for a small job like this, it's often as easy just to manually assign these rather than trying to get them too accurate automatically. If it was a large subdivision with many, many different roads, you would make sure you had them coded correctly. The other thing we can do here, there's a few, but I'll just mention one or two of them. I can right click up here and add a water drop, same as on the main screen. That shows exactly what's happening here. This side is quite steep, but if it was not steep enough, you could go and exaggerate vertically, and you can basically make the scene more dramatic so you can really understand which way the ground is flowing. So I'll leave that at 1:1. If we had more time and we had more roads, we could look at line marking. What I'm going to do here is skip straight to the last tab, which is outputs. So under outputs, if I press export, I've got a whole bunch of options. So for Twinmotion, in this case, we'll use the OBJ format. So once we output that, Twinmotion can import it. What we can also do is export these color-coded triangles into a drawing file, which is what I'm going to do now. The beauty of this viewer is that it's pure graphics, so you can it's super quick and doesn't take much resources. You can actually leave it open on your second monitor all throughout the process, and if you're doing more complex work, it isn't just reviewing. You could right click, for example, here and add a batter override. So change the slope of the batter or add another variation or look at various long sections and cross sections. So it's actually an interactive element, which we'll keep that for a future webinar. Just want to make you aware of it while we have the option open. So export, desktop, and we click on the DWG file. Now I've done this already, so when I open that, what I get is, oh sorry, I haven't got it open. Let me open on my desktop. What we get here is the same triangles, and you can see how the color codes have been applied. Interestingly, if we go into our properties here, we can change the visual style from 2D wireframe to one of the other options, like say modeling. And what that will do is show those materials on the triangles. You can see that they've definitely been applied. So they're still triangle mesh entities, but they have that texture applied to them. I'll put it back onto 2D so it's easier to see. What we can then do is go File, Export, and on the export options, you will see we have FBX by the top, a whole bunch of other options. At the end, we have various IFC formats. So we have verified that when these go out to IFC, they preserve the materials that come with them. So we see a lot of potential for that. There's a lot more we want to do with it. We're very keen to get feedback on what people are doing with that these days. So please let us know. We'll be happy to kind of investigate it further and go into a lot more information and detail on it. So the next thing we will do is open up that exported OBJ file inside in Twinmotion. So here we have Twinmotion. This one we imported an FBX file. The geometry comes in, and in here it's got the same materials that we had applied originally on it. We can override those. So if I press materials here on the left, click on ground, click on nature, I can apply various kinds of grass textures. I won't waste too much time on that. What we have done here already is applied a pond texture, water texture. You can see how the water is rippling here. We can go and spend a lot of time on those, but what I really want to show is how we can add various trees, because this is going to be a public open space area and it's good to show how it's going to work. So if we go up here to where the original road was, let's just pan around here slightly. On vegetation, if I go to trees, I can type in some kind of a tree. So let's type in a pine tree. When I click these trees, as I place them in, they vary in size and color and orientation automatically. But more importantly, on any of these, when I select them, I can look at the age button on the bottom here. And as I age them, they don't just scale, they actually change in definition. So you have a young tree, a medium aged tree, and a very mature tree. So it's very convincing. even before you start putting much effort into it. As you zoom into these as well, you will see that as you get closer, there's a lot more information on the leaves and all the other things that we pick up on subconsciously. But it's very, very clever in that it doesn't chew up resources when they're not needed. So as we're zoomed out here, we don't have quite as much of a need to see all that information. Now, that's just a few basic trees. What we also have here, if we look at these at the options in this menu, there's vegetation. We have bushes, flowers, rocks, etc. I won't go through all of these. What I will do very quickly is select vegetation paint. So what I do here is on the bottom, I make myself a little palette. So if I go to bushes, I will click on, say, bush base 1, and again I'm picking these quite randomly, and I'll say one of these ferns. So when I select these 3, I pick a density I want to have, so I keep it quite low to begin with. I can change it afterwards, and I click on paint, and this little hemisphere type thing that's on my surface, that's the size of my brush. If I make that bigger, I can obviously cover more area, and as I move around here, it will scatter those elements at random around that area. And again, I can keep on clicking on it to make it more dense. After I've done it, I can select one of these to highlight, and well, first of all I can look at what I've done and see that it's pretty impressive straight away. As I look at these, I can select one of these areas and one of these elements, so this bush base 1, and reduce the density of that one. Click on this other one, the Boston fern, and increase the density of that one, etc., etc. So, or I can click on all 3 of them and increase all of them or less. So you click on some type of a dynamic that you want, which quickly paints a picture here. The other options you can obviously scatter more and more trees everywhere. What I am going to do quickly, I'll put in a few rocks. And again, these can be randomized automatically. Also, you got an option for people. So if I click on characters here, I will click on groups and go down here to this group of people where someone's taking a photograph. These are actually animated. So if I place this, we'll say over here somewhere, where this guy is taking a photo of the family. I can now look down from the road. I can see the original trees I've got here, and generally get a view of how this whole setup is going to be done. This is with absolutely no effort at all. I'm putting these in at random. The other things I can do very quickly, because we will do a separate session on this in far more detail, but I want to just show you quickly. If I add some more trees here, it's very, 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 very impressive feature. So I'm not too sure which one to put in here. Let's click on this one here. Okay, and I'll actually bring this up closer to the camera. All right, now we can do a few things with this tree. When we go and look at our aesthetics, we can change the weather. So I can first of all make it rain, which is quite interesting for a wet landscape. It makes a lot of sense. I'll get rid of these pro guys so they don't get too wet. What I can also do is change the season. If you watch the trees, when we move into the different seasons, the leaves change colour. If it goes to winter, we can see that we got some leaves falling and everything else, and then it goes back into the original colour when you go to summer. So with very, very little effort, we can build up a very, very impressive looking, very, very realistic and immersive illustration of what our plan is going to be. So for public consultations or for general communication, it's an amazing tool. What I'm showing you here is only a very, very basic overview. We can do a huge amount more information. The guys in civil site design are automating how you can get information from their software directly into here as well. One of the things I haven't mentioned is there's an outputs tab here where you can output images, videos, all kinds of other options. You can even navigate this thing in computer game format as well if you want. So the reason this is so interesting and exciting is that software is available for free at the moment with BricsCAD. So if you've got a license, you can download a free copy. So make absolutely sure you do that. Just to very, very briefly summarize what we've done today. We started off with the initial analysis of our area. So we showed slope arrows just to identify where is the embankment, where is the flat area, and where do we start working on our ponds. We then did an initial design where we placed one pond in place and picked an elevation and got the initial contour set. We did some iterations where when we built the spillway, we changed the design so we had an even slope down to the outflow area. So I think on the screen capture it shows -6%. On today's session we did 7%. Depending on what you need, you can set it up the way you want. We could also have balanced the volumes and everything else, but we skipped that for today just to give a brief overview. We did some production documentation. So we produced some type of a section going through to show the typical areas. I think the one on the screen capture here is slightly different to what we did today, but it can be any version that we think is relevant, where we just draw the sections and show the information. And the last thing we've just shown here is a very, very brief taste of twin motion. And we can do so much more with that, but we'll save it for a different day. So with that, thank you for your attention. We look forward to doing more and more of these. So please give us feedback on what you think is most relevant for webinars, because we can do hundreds of them, but the more feedback we get, the more relevant we'll keep them to what you need. So with that, I look forward to seeing you. Oh, before I go, if you want to download BricsCAD, you just go to bricsys.com and you'll see a download option. So you can just literally download a trial for 30 days. What you can also do is, when you've got a license already, go to bricsys.com and go to my account. When you go to manage licenses, you will see the option to download the Twin Motion promo. So please do that. You'd be crazy not to. And the other thing is, don't forget to look in the App Store. So go to, if you search for BricsCAD App Store, you'll see hundreds and hundreds of different add-ons that are very, very highly recommended. So once again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you in the future sessions.